Most of you all know me on the pod today. I'm Travis. This is, physician webinar. We're going to talk about some burnout prevention strategies is what Megan and Sim shared with me. And I was up all night with our 1 year old because he was not feeling well. And my wife's a physician, so she has to go in and do procedures, right? And, taking one for the team. So I'm sure a lot of y'all have been in that boat before with yourselves and also spouses. So it's going to be the Megan and Sim show today, and they lead our uh, their part. Well, Sim leads our physicians team on SLP Wealth. Megan's a partner. It's, SLP Wealth and Student Loan Planner. We've also got Angie and Ben today from our physicians team. So I'm going to hide. They've got a great show for you today, folks.
Thanks, Travis. Yep. Angie and Ben will be in the chat today, so we'll start going through some things. And if you have questions or things you want to comment on or have, want us to elaborate on, throw that ideally in the Q&A section. I think in the chat, I'm going to reserve for just plugging like links or things that might be helpful for people to use. But we could also introduce ourselves one more time. So I'm Megan McGuire, one of the consultants on the Student Loan Planner team and partner with SLP Wealth. And we've got Sim. Me
Hey,
and Sim are going to
everybody.
run it.
I see some names I know. I'm not going to call you out. I'm Sim Terwilliger. I am one of the partners and planners here at SLP Wealth. I also lead our physician planning group, and I'm also one of the consultants at SLP. So lots of hats. I have a big head.
Mm-hmm. And Angie and Ben in the background. Well, let's go ahead and jump on in.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We have a great presentation today. Talk about some tricks and tips to avoid burnout and live your dreams. And Megan, I cannot share my screen, so it's on you.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Let me fix that. Let's see. I will fix that now. Okay. See if we could do that now.
All right, here we go. Okay, everyone. So like we said, we're going to be talking about tips and trips to avoid burnout and live your financial dreams instead. So why are we talking about this in the first place? Well, I work with a lot of physicians. Burnout is a really big topic I see affecting a lot of my clients, especially. So planning shows you what's possible. Some things that are possible could include cutting back your hours at work. So not necessarily retiring completely, but doing what we call semi-retirement or being financially independent. Maybe for you, you just have a big purchase you want to make. Maybe it's a dream home. It could be a really big vacation. That's an opportunity. Maybe you love what you do, but you don't love dealing with like bureaucracy at your work. And so you would love to just be able to up and go and do something else and take a job that you love, even if it doesn't pay as much. Or making work optional, which we talked about, which is a little bit different than cutting back your hours at work. But for some people, that's what you want to do. And we can show you if that's possible. So let's talk about ways to lower your AGI. What is AGI? AGI is adjusted gross income. If you've done a student loan plan with us before, you've probably heard us talk about it. That is the magic number that they are using to calculate your payment on a student loan payment if you're doing like income-driven repayment, right? So some ways you can lower your AGI. If you have any like moonlighting that you're doing, you're allowed to do some moonlighting, you have a side hustle, or your locums. So basically you're somebody who has 1099 income. You are considered self-employed in some manner. You can open what's called a SEP IRA or a solo 401k. There's some pros and cons to both. They're not the same type of account, but having access to one is a way where you can sock money on a pre-tax basis.
I love that one too, because I think we're always talking about like how we can keep lowering the student loan payment if people are going towards PSLF or towards loan forgiveness or really just wanting to get to retirement sooner. Those buckets can be filled up and maxed out pretty quickly at just your current employer. And if you can only do the the employee contribution, the 23,000 for 2024, then it might be nice to have another bucket to run to other than the backdoor Roth, which we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But that's a really cool little tip if you do have additional income that you can sock more money aside to savings.
Yeah, and what Megan's talking about too, just to elaborate, is that when you're self-employed, you're wearing two hats. You're the employee and the employer. So as an employee, you may already have a 401k at like your W-2 job. So as the employer of your 1099 income, you can do what's called profit sharing. So you still can put some money away. 457Bs, that's like the Wild West of like retirement accounts because they're so different. There's so many different kinds of 457Bs. High level, there's governmental and non-governmental, and there's some nuances to both. Most people have non-governmental unless you're working for like the government. And there's some things to know about the 457B. So you always want to kind of read the plan rules. And if you don't want to read the plan rules, you might want to have someone do that for you. Another trick is, for some of you, it might make sense to do married filing separately, depending on what state you live in. If you are going for some kind of forgiveness, it's a way to ignore your spouse's income off of your AGI calculation. So if you have a lower income in a common law state, what's a common law state? Most states are common law states. There's only a handful of states, mostly the West Coast and randomly Wisconsin, that are considered community property states. And it has to do with how they do married filing separately. So in a common law state, it's a little bit more straightforward. I earned what I earned, you earned what you earned, split it, and it's done, right? Community property, they take everything that everybody earned and then they split it in half. And so sometimes that's really advantageous if you're like, maybe you're a physician and you have a great income and your spouse maybe is a stay-at-home parent, you're shifting a lot of your income to them. And this is a legitimate strategy to lower your AGI. So how about growing wealth and not thinking about student loans for a second, right? So we are student loan planners, but not everyone has student loans. Maybe you did a plan with us and you got your loans forgiven. Congrats. So some ways to grow wealth, doing backdoor Roths. So this is confusing for a lot of people. There's no account called backdoor Roth. You're not going to like go on Vanguard and find like a backdoor Roth. So backdoor refers to the mechanism. It is a backdoor way of contributing into your Roth. We have to do this because there's a rule that if you make above a certain AGI, I think for this year, it's like 230,000 married filing jointly. If you make above this dollar amount, you are not allowed to put money into the Roth anymore. So we do it. We take an extra step. We do it the backdoor way. So we put the money into a traditional IRA, wait a couple of days, just let it clear your bank account, and then you transfer it into the Roth. So the money ends up where it needs to go. Yes, it's dumb. The IRS knows everybody does this. I do this. They probably should just change the AGI rules and let everybody do Roths, but it is what it is, right? Now, when you're doing this backdoor Roth mechanism, there is something to watch out for, and it's called the pro rata rule. It's very confusing. In fact, it's so confusing. We're going to do a whole webinar on it in just a few weeks here. So if you want to hear
On
me
Valentine's Day.
about it, we're going to whine about it. We're calling it whine about the pro rata rule. At a high level, it means that if you have money in pre-tax IRAs, which some of you might, and you're doing this backdoor Roth process, it's no longer going to be totally tax-free. So you want to watch out for that. And we have ways that you can avoid it too. Megan, why don't you talk about the next one? Because I know this is big for a lot of our clients.
Yep. Yeah. So own occupation disability insurance. So disability insurance, I think, is an extremely extremely important part to a financial plan. It protects your paycheck, your income, right? So a lot of times, to put it into perspective, when I talk to folks about disability insurance and like the need for disability insurance, I ask the question, which sounds kind of funny, but can you live without your income, or can you live off of 20% off of your income right now? And if the answer is no, then you probably need to be looking at disability insurance to protect what you spent a lot of time and money investing in, which is your profession and your ability to earn income. So own occupation disability insurance is extremely important for practicing professionals because it protects the ability for you to do your own occupation. So let's say you are sick or injured for an extended period of time, and you can't do your job as a physician specifically, but you could, watch the neighborhood kids, do something that doesn't require as much like on your feet day to day, like 9 to, long hours. Own occupation disability insurance will still pay you if you're not doing your own occupation, which is pretty important. And this is usually we could look at these types of policies to supplement what an employer covers, right? So there might be a floor that we already have covered by the employer, and we can supplement on top to make sure that we're protecting as much of our income as we can. Because this, I think, a premature disability is statistically more likely than a premature death. And I think, too, this could be something that really derails a financial plan when it comes to saving for retirement, because that would be some of the first things to go, right? If you're not earning the same amount of income, we're having to make sacrifices somewhere in our budget, and saving for retirement might be one of those things. So it can push you back quite a bit if we don't have the proper protection in place. But anything you want to add to that, since you see a lot of these policies too?
Yeah, I feel like it's worth mentioning the pink tax. Unfortunately, this is more expensive for women, and apparently
Mhm.
that's because we are more likely to get disabled than men.
Go out on
So
claim, yeah.
I know it's like one more thing, right? But you can't really think about growing your wealth until you protect the vehicle that you're using to grow your wealth, which is your income. That is your main vehicle for growing your wealth. So that is why we protect it.
Hmm.
We also think through what's called a 3-bucket strategy, which means having 3 buckets of money to pull from during your retirement. Those 3 buckets are pre-tax, after tax, and taxable. So if you've met with me, you've heard me talk about this ad nauseum. So pre-tax is like your 401k that we talked about, that solo 401k. For a lot of you guys, this is very valuable because you're in a very high tax bracket. And as you know, tax brackets can change anytime, could be even higher later. So that deduction today is very valuable. But then we have our after tax bucket. So even though you don't get any special treatment today, theoretically, you invest in what we're going to call well-diversified portfolio. There's no guarantees with investing, but that money grows. And then when you pull it out in your retirement, it is tax-free. And everybody loves that because who likes paying taxes? And the third bucket is your taxable brokerage account. Very, very important if you are thinking about financial independence, because the first 2 buckets we talked about, you're not really supposed to touch them before age 59 and a half. And yes, there's exceptions and loopholes and such, but that is the general idea. With the taxable account, you can touch that whenever you want. As long as the funds have been in there for more than 12 months, you do pay taxes, but it's at a preferential tax rate. And that's kind of why we want all three. It gives you a little bit of protection. We call it tax diversification too. So hit all three if you can. Now, one of those buckets, the pre-tax, the HSA actually is kind of 2 buckets. So that's your health savings account. So it's pre-tax because you get a nice tax deduction today. But if you don't use it for medical bills and you treat it as a retirement account, so you just invest it, let it grow, leave it alone, then when you hit retirement and you're pulling money out of it for your medical bills, that's going to be tax-free. HSAs are a really great account also if you're thinking about financial independence because it can kind of bridge your medical expenses until you hit age 65 and can get Medicare. So HSAs, we kind of like to joke around here, like if you took me to a cocktail party and you asked me my favorite retirement account, that's so nerdy, right? To have a favorite
I was
retirement.
gonna say, you get like so jazzed about HSA accounts, and it
I
made
love
me really
HSA.
jazzed about them.
So what I tell people to do, because I follow my own advice, I'm not a hypocrite, okay? What I tell people to do is save your receipts for your medical bills. And I don't mean like get a shoebox and stick them in there. So on my phone, I have Dropbox. You can use whatever cloud service you like, but I'll take a photo of my medical bills and I just stick them in a folder. And if like 30 years down the road, I want to pull some money out, I've been letting that money grow for 30 years. So hopefully my HSA is a nice bucket now, but I can pull some money out and reimburse myself for that bill if I want to, even if it's 30 years. So really cool option.
Yeah. Would it make sense too to maybe like I don't know, the way I was thinking about it is like upload the receipts for proof, of course, but then like have a running tab in like Excel maybe with like the bills that you have spent on medical expenses so you know like how much you are able to take out tax free. Does that
So
make
I
sense
think
or
that's a great idea. And I thought about doing that, except I'm like super busy. So what I do instead is when I save the receipt and I put I put the date on it and I'll actually put the dollar amount into the name of the file. So
Mhm.
it might say
Okay.
like, such and such a visit, $100 or whatever, right? So now I know in that file and I can just pull it. I think the Excel is a great idea if you have the discipline to do it. I do not. So
Yeah. So in the chat, someone said HSA reimbursements require bills to be within the calendar year, and that's not accurate. HSAs are different than FSAs. That might be an FSA um, comment where like an FSA that is true. Flex savings accounts, those are a little more strict and they're not as fun as the HSA, right? You wouldn't be going on about them at a cocktail party. They're
no.
so FSAs they are a use it or lose it type of situation. So you can put money in. It's a smaller limit than an HSA, so it's not a giant bucket, but you can put money into an FSA and it has to be used within that same calendar year. So that's for an FSA. HSA, there's no requirement there to use it within the year. You can let it roll over for as long as you want. You literally could roll it into retirement, like Sim was saying.
Now, the deal, though, I probably should mention this too, is that to have an HSA, you have to have what's called a high deductible health plan. And that's not necessarily right for everybody, because
Mhm.
do you have a higher deductible, you potentially may have more out-of-pocket expenses. So I think a high deductible health plan could make sense for someone who maybe doesn't have a lot of medical expenses. Maybe you don't have like a lot of complicated medical conditions, or you're just okay with your deductible. So you do want to evaluate your health insurance, pick your best health insurance, and then if it happens to be high deductible, then yay, HSA. And you don't have to use the one with your employer either. So I can talk about HSAs all day, but other ways to grow wealth, I know. Other ways to grow wealth. So your compensation package is not just your salary. So compensation package can mean things like time off, right? Because that's income to you, continuing education, malpractice insurance. Do they cover malpractice? Does it have a tail? Can you use your malpractice insurance for moonlighting? Are you moonlighting, and will your malpractice cover that? Or are they only going to cover what you do at the W-2 job? So a lot of times we think we have to negotiate salary, and sometimes salary really is not negotiable depending on the organization, but they have already set aside, a certain dollar value, like this is what your total compensation package is. And so pieces of it could be negotiable. And I always do think it's worth talking to your colleagues. I know back in our parents' generation, that used to be very taboo. Nowadays, kind of keep things out in the open, make sure what you're getting is fair. So the next two strategies, so there's tax loss harvesting and tax aware investing. Very important for those of you who are thinking about financial independence and becoming more optional. So we were talking about, with our 3-bucket strategy, one of those accounts is called a taxable brokerage. That's that account that's flexible. You don't have to wait until you're age 59 and a half, but you do want to watch out for the taxes you're going to be paying. We always want to minimize that. So part of tax aware investing is being aware of, what am I selling in the first place, right? Do you know about specific identification, first in, first out, average cost method? How do you know which funds to pull out? And do you even know what any of that means, what I just said? So it's very important to learn what it means to do tax aware investing. Tax loss harvesting is a way where we can intentionally garner some losses. And normally you cannot take a capital loss against your income, but with tax loss harvesting, we can take $3,000 per year with the carry forward. What that means is if you've had more than a $3,000 capital loss, and you weren't able to take it all on your tax return that year, you can take it in future years until you've taken all of it. So these are just a couple of tricks to lower your tax bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's the one, like, it's not a catch, but that's the one thing about the taxable account, is that what eats into your return is taxes over time. And being smart about how to minimize those taxes, take advantage of things, like tax loss harvesting, can really chip away at the cost over time. And then you can hoard those losses, like you were saying, Sim. You can hoard those losses if we can't take, up to if we have a lot more than 3,000 in one given year, we can hoard them for future years. So it's a long-term play. It's a long-term ongoing play to do tax loss harvesting, but it could really help, I think, minimize taxes on an ongoing basis and just keep you pretty efficient with your investing and with your taxes overall. So I think it's you
Yeah.
think it's fun, but it's
As with anything, it's like you also have to know what you don't know. You have to be careful of something called a wash sale, which is when you
Mhm.
try to take the loss and then you're like, okay, cool, I sold these funds. Now I'm going to buy something like substantially similar. Yeah, the IRS isn't going to allow that. They're not going to let you take that loss. And so you will not be able to do that.
And they coordinate between spousal accounts too, which is really important to know, and retirement account, different type
Yeah.
of accounts. So they coordinate between all accounts, your employer 401k, your personal, IRA, and then your spouse's. So if you don't know what your spouse's investment account is doing, there's an opportunity for, a wash sale there if you didn't know that they held the fund that you were going into. So it can be a little bit of a tricky thing to keep organized and make sure you're avoiding wash sales when it comes to tax loss harvesting, but um, definitely worth the savings over time, I would think.
Yeah.
For the effort.
So let's talk about physician mortgages. We get a lot of questions about those. These make sense for some people, maybe not for others. Now, they're not just for physicians. They do also cover like attorneys and dentists, but they're called physician mortgages. And so the deal is, if you don't take a physician mortgage, so if you do like a conventional route, the mortgage lender is taking a risk on you, right? Most people go with a 30-year mortgage. 30 years is a really long time where like somebody could default on their mortgage. And so to take some of that risk off of the mortgage company, they want you to have skin in the game. And so the way that you have skin in the game is your down payment. And so that's where that 20% down comes from.
Mhm.
If you don't put 20% down, it does not mean that you can't get a mortgage, but it does mean that the mortgage company wants some kind of compensation for that risk. And so the way it's done is called PMI, which stands for primary mortgage insurance. And so this is a fee, can be hundreds of dollars a month depending on the size of the mortgage, but this is a fee that is tacked onto your monthly payment. And so you pay this typically until you hit that 20% equity amount in your home. With the physician mortgage, you don't need to put 20% down. You can put anywhere from 0 to 10, depending on what you're quoted, and you don't pay PMI because they know that you're not a risky person to lend to, right? You're a physician, you have a really secure job and a great income. So you'll very likely be able to meet your obligation. Now, it's great for some folks, maybe feel like in a high cost of living area, it's going to be really difficult or just very timely to hit that 20%. A physician mortgage can make sense, right? The trade-off, of course, is that the less you put down, the higher your monthly payment. But again, you kind of want to run that math and see what makes sense for you.
Yeah. Running the numbers is super helpful because saving for the 20% might put you back. Like, it might take you some years to save that. And then you're also working up against the market itself. Like, you're saving, but then the market's kind of doing this potentially or this like in the last couple of years, right? So it takes you a little longer to build up that amount. So I think physician mortgages, and I think, there are other mortgages that allow lower than 20% down. Like, we don't have to shoot for the 20% down, but we have to be aware of maybe the pros and cons of not putting a lot down when you're purchasing a home. A big pro is getting into the home sooner. Con is that your mortgage is higher and you have less equity or skin in the game when it comes to the home that you purchased. And it can be tricky if you purchase and you have to sell like pretty soon after you first bought. That's when you might have an issue with, being hopefully not upside down on the mortgage, but not really getting anything out when it comes to equity to roll into the next property if you have to move. So we actually have a webinar coming up. We haven't put it into the newsletter yet, but we're going to have a webinar on how to buy a house like a boss. I think that's what we're calling it. And we're going to have one of our consultants on the team, David. He's a former mortgage broker. So he did this for his day job for years, talking through physician mortgages, talking through mortgages in general, helping people like navigate the money side of purchasing a home. So that should be a pretty cool one to jump into if y'all are interested in learning more about purchasing. So look out for that here coming up at the end of, I think we're going to do it end of February. But okay.
Megan, you are our in-house cash flow queen, so I would love for you to talk about that last point.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So oh my gosh, I love cash flow planning. That's honestly how I started my financial planning career. The firm I started with did a lot of cash flow planning when it came, and all that means is we start really the plan off of somebody's cash flow. So the gross income coming in, the money that's going out. Some might think, hey, that's obvious. Why would you not start there? But a lot of times that's not the case. A lot of times advisors can just jump straight into investments or jump straight into projections. And so I always really like to get down to what's actually coming in. That's maybe the easier part, what income is coming in, but more so what expenses are going out. And so I really, really enjoy getting in front of someone who's in residency or in training where their income is a lot lower than what it will be in the future, because that is a really great opportunity to build some good habits and to start to prioritize. Oh, hang on one second. I always have a frog in my throat, I feel like. But making sure that we're prioritizing dollars towards what our goals are and being proactive about what our money will be going towards once that higher income comes in. I think that's such a fun time of planning for me as a planner. I think that's so fun to really start to model out like, hey, this is what's going to happen today. This is what we're going to prioritize now during residency. And oh, this is a mock cash flow to show like what income and what expenses might look like in the future. And we can model in like a future mortgage, or we can model higher retirement savings, that type of thing, which makes it pretty cool and proactive versus reactive when it comes to budgeting, to traditional budgeting strategies. So I think budgeting, that word is cringeworthy. It's not, I think historically that word has been very restrictive. But I think budgeting really is, and maybe I think another better word is just building a parameter, like parameters to stay within for spending. That might be a better way to think about it. But I like to tell folks and kind of reframe our brain about it to think about it more as us saying yes to things that we actually care about and that are going towards our goals and our future, and saying no to things that don't really bring us joy or that don't really, go towards those goals that we're trying to work towards. So it's really just being more intentional. I think budgeting or setting a parameter around spending is just being more intentional about where our money goes on a month-to-month basis. And that definitely does not mean like not having fun or having fun money. Um, but it's more so like, how can we work with what we've got coming in to live the best life that we can today and save for our future? How can we do that all with the dollars coming in today? So, um, I think, yeah. Anything you want to add to that? We talked about budgeting
Yeah.
yesterday, actually, Sim.
This is a big topic, and I think what's great about it is it's important to show what's possible too. So I think a lot of people will say, well, Sam, you're a financial planner, you're just going to tell me to save more money for retirement. Probably true, by the way, but because most people need to save more for retirement. But I have also told people you need to spend more money on yourself. That's part
Mm-hmm.
of planning, is showing you again what's possible. I'm going to pick on Angie here on the call. Angie's husband is a pediatrician, and so we actually recorded a podcast on this transition from residency to attending. And I love how Angie said it. She said, you work too hard, you suffered too much to just eat rice and beans. Because that isn't that like the old school advice, right? Eat
Mm-hmm.
rice and beans for like 2 years, live like a resident, just like throw money at your debt. Which maybe is sometimes the right advice, but is not always the case. And I think that can lead to burnout too, if you don't
Mm-hmm.
have any kind of spending for yourself too. You have to live your life now too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think budgeting really can be a form of self-care because it really is just prioritizing what you care about and, making sure we're taking care of ourselves too. So, in a lot of our budgets that we do with planning, we'll have like I was telling Sam, sometimes I literally will put the word in the budget. It'll be called something like treat yourself. And, sometimes it's because I have a client who finds it hard to do that and they have to remember, oh yeah, I've got some money I can spend on a massage this month or something like that. And for maybe the other side of the spectrum where we're trying to hone in spending a bit, it's, hey, still treat yourself, but let's stay within this parameter. So,
So
yeah.
you can take this as your sign. Go get your avocado toast this morning. Perfect. So let's talk about some things you might want to get done this year, 2024, for 2023. So you have until the tax filing deadline of April 15th to make your contributions for 2023 for your backdoor Roths. I'm going to put an asterisk next to what I just said. So for solo Ks, you have until March 15th if you're an S Corp or corporated, right? For if you're just a sole proprietor, then you have until April 15th. Okay. HSA contributions for last year, you have until April 15th. So deadline is coming up. Make sure you get that done. Now, there's a really corny expression, by the way, time in the market beats timing the market. And so usually if you're in the position where right now you're going to go ahead and do 2023, probably go ahead and do 2024 too if you have the cash for it. Just go ahead, get it done for this year if you can. Okay, know when you should file your return. So yeah, we all know the April 15th deadline, but for some of you, depending on the timing of your student loan recertification, strategically, it could make sense to file an extension, right? If you had a lot lower income in 2022 and then 23, it shot way up. Maybe that's when you got your attending salary. Maybe you want to recertify your income using 2022. So you're going to want to file an extension. So take a look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a pretty cool tool when it comes to just minimizing payments, especially if you're someone who's going towards loan forgiveness, either PSLF or the longer term loan forgiveness. Recertification strategy it can be pretty helpful when it comes to reducing your costs for your payments. So like you said, with the extension, you have the ability to extend your tax return until October. So let's use an example. Let's say your recertification date is in July. So you have to update your income in July. Your current payment is off of or sorry, your 2022 tax return that's on file, the most recent one right now, was lower because you were a resident or a partial year of a resident income. And 2023 is going to be the first year where it's going to show like your full attending salary, or maybe you got a giant bonus in 2023, something like that. Then you can strategically decide, okay, well, taxes are due April 15th. So that does mean if you owe taxes, you need to pay by April 15th, but you can extend your filing to October 15th. And so if we do that extension, we extend and we don't file our 2023 return until October. When you have to go and update your income in July, the most recent tax return on file is going to be 2022 still. So you can lock in another 12 months of a really low payment working towards loan forgiveness. So that's just a little elaboration on what we mean by like getting strategic with recertifications. So you can find your recertification date on studentaid.gov. There's you have to keep, it's kind of silly. You have to keep clicking like view details, view details, view details, like as you go along. And then eventually you'll, like when you're looking at your loan details, it'll eventually show like your anniversary date. And that's the date when your payment would change. So you do get notified maybe 60 days before the anniversary date to update the income. That just means that they need that documentation from you, like, 60 days before the payment's actually going to change. But that be something that you can look at to see if it's something you should consider for this year.
And just to add to that, to the recertification date, nobody needs to recertify prior to March 1st, as long as your actual recertification date is after March 1st. So Mohela may reach out to you in February, right? Which is actually like tomorrow. They may reach out to you in February saying, hey, you need to recertify. If your recertification date is after March 1st, that is probably legitimate. If it is not after March 1st, it's probably a mistake. We have ways to fight it. I have personally gone through the process of filing a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau successfully. So there is like a chain of command you can follow if need be. So know your dates and know if you need to actually recertify or not.
Mm-hmm. And a little message in the chat. So recertification, filing taxes doesn't automatically recertify you. You have to, well, there's one of two ways that your income could be updated. If you've given prior access to your tax return, which you can check this in studentaid.gov as well to see if you have, we have an article and a YouTube video on how to check this on our website. But you can either allow the Department of Ed to have access to your IRS. They do it through this like IRS data retrieval tool to update your income by your anniversary date. So that doesn't mean that when you file taxes, it all of a sudden updates your payment. You have your own income-driven repayment anniversary. So that usually is probably around when you applied for the income-driven plan initially. That's probably not as accurate these days, though, because people got pushed back so far during the COVID forbearance with recertifications. Like they just kept pushing the need to recertify income because of the COVID forbearance. But it doesn't automatically update your income. But if you wanted to check to make sure like you weren't linked, you could do that in studentaid.gov. Otherwise, you're going to have to actively apply. There's like a recertification application that you're going to actively have to submit by your anniversary. So I hope that makes sense.
So thinking through kind of like your little financial to-do checklist, next one on our list is estate planning and asset protection. And honestly, guys, for physicians, this is a topic that deserves its own webinar. This is super complicated and important. When I think about asset protection, I'm also thinking about those of you who are maybe in high-risk specialties, and asset protection is crucial. So this is in our webinar today, not going to get the attention it deserves. We're going to just hit kind of some highlights here. So we're thinking through like wills, power of attorney. So let me go back to wills for a second. Wills is, last will and testament, right? Who gets my stuff if something happens to me. It's also where you can specify guardianship provisions for your children. So that is what that document is accomplishing. Power of attorney, if you're like incapacitated, for example, and you need someone to like pull money out of accounts for you, right? Medical directive, who is making medical decisions for you if you're like in a coma, and what do you want those decisions to be? I remember I was like a young child when the Terry Schiavo case happened. I don't know if you remember that, Megan, this poor woman who, I guess she was in an accident and she was on life support and a feeding tube. And there was this big battle between her husband and her parents, who I guess otherwise maybe got along, is how I understood the story. But then, of course, when there's a medical situation, people don't tend to get along anymore. And so parents wanted to preserve her, keep her on the support, and husband said no. So very long and drawn out legal battle that could have been avoided if there was something in writing about what her wishes were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And not listed on here, but when we think through asset protection, if you live in something called a tenants by the entirety state, which I always have to Google because I don't remember all of them, right? Some states have what's called tenancy by the entirety. This is a form of titling. So for your house or your brokerage account. And this is a very strange thing too, because some states will let you do tenancy by the entirety just for real property, just for your home. Some of them will let you do real property, personal property, like your brokerage account. But what is that titling? That titling means, let's say something happens, you get sued, and someone's coming after your assets, and your home is titled tenancy by the entirety with your spouse. This is only for spouses. That means you own all of the asset and your spouse owns all of the asset. So they cannot take that asset because your spouse owns all of it. For a brokerage account, if you have a joint, tenants by the entirety, same thing. You own all of that brokerage account, your spouse owns all of that brokerage account. So I think for a spouse, if you're married and you have the ability to title something tenancy by the entirety, that can be a great way to do asset protection. And I'll caveat that by saying I am not an attorney, so always check with an attorney. Okay. Life and disability insurance. So we talked about the disability insurance. This is a method of protecting your income being your vehicle for growing your wealth. Life insurance is important, especially if there is someone who is relying on your income and something were to happen to you, right? So disability replaces a percentage of your income. You're still alive, thank goodness. Life insurance, tragic, right? Because that means you're not here anymore. You do have to think through, what would your income have done if you were still here with us for 20 or 30 years, right? Would that income have been used maybe to pay a mortgage, send your kids to college? Do you want your spouse to be able to quit their job and grieve your untimely demise? These are things to think through when you're thinking about how much life insurance to buy. You do want to also think about the kind of life insurance, right? Physicians are frequently targeted products that you just don't need, right? Because who does it benefit? The person who's selling you the product. So think about, do I really need a whole life policy? What's a universal life policy? Typically, I tend to just say, get term and call it a day. We do have some specific instances where whole life can also make sense for an asset protection or estate planning purpose. But if you are not sure, ask someone who's a fiduciary. Fiduciary means they have to put your needs above their own.
Mm-hmm. Life insurance titling too, or benefit, like listing beneficiaries, is a form of free estate planning as well. I think you say that a lot, Sim, where
any titling and any beneficiaries you list.
Yes, and it even trumps the will. Is that right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if
Yeah.
you write in your will, hey, I want my wife to have my, everything, give her everything. But your life insurance is still titled with your ex-wife's name. Your life insurance proceeds are going to go to your ex-wife. So that's going to be an issue.
Maybe you were in residency and you had a 403B and you weren't married yet. And so you listed and then you got married and you did your estate planning. You listed, hey, I want everything to go to my spouse. You forgot about that old 403B. That's still going to mom because that's who's listed as the beneficiary. So that is a free form of estate planning. Yep.
Yep. And you can change that at any time. You just have to go to that particular vehicle or instrument, whatever it is. Sometimes there's a form you have to fill out and send in. A lot of times you can change it online though, pretty easily. So that includes bank accounts, investment accounts, life insurance, anything that could be left behind if you were to pass. You want to make sure there's some kind of plan for it.
And I always like to encourage folks, maybe every, not every year, but maybe every 3 or 4 years, just go through your beneficiary designations and make sure it is still in accordance with your wishes, right? For your wills, whoever you listed for the guardianship for your kids, do you still want them to be the guardian, for your kids, for example? You can change these documents at any time. If you move states, then you probably will want a second look at your estate planning documents just to make sure they're still in accordance with that state's laws. And then, of course, benefit selection, open enrollment. For a lot of people, it happens towards the end of the year. There's a few exceptions. Sometimes you'll hear randomly June or July, but typically it's around October, November. The benefits you choose, very important, right? Health insurance, And actually, some employers offer like a legal plan. Since we're talking about estate planning, they offer like a legal plan. And so if you go through that legal plan and use, it's almost like picking a physician who's like in your insurance network, right? But for attorneys. And so you can actually, in some cases, get a free estate plan. So just go through the network, see if there's an attorney that you like. Maybe you heard about, my friend used that guy, had a good experience, and see if you can just get, and now it usually only, by the way, only covers the basic documents. So wills, power of attorney, medical directive, it probably won't cover something like a trust, but we'll take it, right? If it covers a portion of it.
Yeah, my mom did this with her benefits. She is not a physician, she's a librarian, but she had benefits available for legal, and she went and got her will and her like estate planning docs all done. So that's, and it was really it wasn't free, but it was very inexpensive compared to what it would have been if she went outside of her employer benefits. So I thought that was a really cool benefit.
Today I learned that Megan's mom is a librarian. I didn't know that.
Yes.
And
my grandma is too. Yeah, I come from a family of librarians.
That's really cool. And also, so DAF contributions. What's a DAF? A DAF is a donor advised fund, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, this is another way to, if you're charitably inclined, this is a tax efficient way to make charitable contributions. So if you are doing that, you will do it by the end of the year. Okay, so we're going to talk about that here. So some investing strategies. So specific identification of shares, what's that? So we were talking about that taxable brokerage account. That is really important if you're thinking about, going part-time or being financially independent. If you're going to sell from that account because you need some money, one way that you can try to lower your tax bill is by identifying specifically which shares you would like to sell. So most custodians have a default method. The two most common ones I've seen are either first in, first out, which refers to the earliest shares that you bought, which theoretically may also be the most appreciated shares. Another method I see is average cost. So they're kind of just taking, like it sounds, an average cost. So specific identification of shares is an intentional way to decide what you're going to liquidate. Tax loss harvesting we talked about, so I will skip that one since we chatted about that. So this next one, right? So donation of appreciated securities. So for those of you who are charitably inclined and you have a taxable account, you may have some shares that have appreciated. So they're worth more now than what you paid for it, and that's great. So what you can do is take those shares directly. You don't have to sell them, and you can just donate those shares to the donor advised fund. And you can get a tax deduction for this if you itemize up to, I think it's 30% of your AGI. So for those of you who are itemizing, this can be a way to maximize those deductions, right? Get as much as you can so that you can itemize. Mega backdoor Roths. So these are becoming more popular. This is not for everyone, right? So we're just kind of throwing out some strategies. I'm not saying you have to do all of these, right? But mega backdoor Roths, this is something that you can do if you have a 401k plan that allows after-tax contributions. So you make a large after-tax contribution, and the plan also has to allow an in-service withdrawal, and then you can move that basically into a Roth account. So that's why they call it mega backdoor Roth, because this is another backdoor way of getting money into your Roth. And it's mega because it's more than the annual amount that you can do for the Roth, which this year is $7,000. So for something like this, you do need to, again, read your summary plan description, the SPD summary plan description. That's like the rules of the plan, right? And that's something you want to read anyway when you start your job. Figure out what's allowed. And I know it's boring. So it's just one of those things, you just do it, get it done, or have someone do it for you. But things that you're looking for in the SPD, in addition to this, to see if this is a strategy you can do. When are you allowed to participate in the plan in the first place? Can you start making 401k contributions right away? Some employers make you wait like a year, and they do that on purpose because that's a way for them to retain you. This is an employee retention method, because they're like, well, we're putting all this money into like training you and acquiring you, so we want a way to keep you. Or they will let you participate right away. So you can start making 401k contributions right away, but they may not. They may not do that until you've been with them for a certain period of time. They may make you stay there for a certain period of time until you can keep all of their contributions. So there may be what's called a vesting schedule. Maybe you have to stay with them for 3 years before you can keep all of the contributions they've made. So those are some of the types of things that you'll look for in the SPD. Another thing to look for, and we'll talk about this a lot when we talk about the pro rata rule, but if you have pre-tax IRAs and you're trying to clean this up so you can do backdoor Roths nicely, not worry about taxes, you want to look up, does my 401k plan allow rollovers? Does it accept rollovers? I think 70% of plans do, but you have to read it, right? So you can take your pre-tax IRA, roll it right into your 401k, and now you're all clear to do backdoor Roths without worrying about it. And then the Augusta rule, this has become very popular with a lot of our clients. So if you are renting out your home for no more than 14 days, you don't have to report that income. You also can't report the losses, but you don't have to report that income on your taxes. So you can rent out your home for 14 days, charge really well for it, and pocket the money.
Yeah, this is because of the golf tournament that happens in Augusta, in Georgia. So sorry, my my cord got stuck on my chair, but the golf tournament. So Augusta is like a small little town in Georgia, so small, and no one really the population. I can't remember what the population is, but when the Masters comes in. Of course, it's flooded with people from all over the world, all over the country, and they don't have a ton of hotels there. They have, people's residences there, and so they will rent out their residence while people are there visiting for the Masters. And the Augusta rule is, they're probably only ever going to rent out their property when Augusta or when the Masters is rolling in. So I thought that was kind of cool to mention why it's called that.
Megan, one of my biggest regrets in life, I guess I haven't had a very hard life, is I was in Philly when the Pope was there, if you guys remember that a few years ago. So the whole city shut down and everybody was renting out just a room, not even their house. Like everyone was renting. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I should have just like left and slept on a friend's couch.
Yeah. It's like the Super Bowl. Like if the Super Bowl is coming into your town, like, yeah. And this isn't for everybody. Some folks do not want anybody in their house, which completely understandable. But if there's like a unique opportunity, that is maybe an interesting thing you could take advantage of.
Yeah. So we'll kind of go quickly because I know we're coming up on time, but tax planning. So some ways it can save you some money. If you're a new attending and you just finished with training, you can kind of think through the timing of when to file your taxes, that extension question, that's an example. Should you do married filing separately or not? That's an area of tax planning. If you are a locums tenens physician and you're earning 100,000 or more of 1099 income, you can start to think through, should you be an S corp, for example, or should you file as an S corp? Practice owner with more than 5 employees, dual physician household that's charitably inclined. So we have a lot of areas of tax planning that we can cover, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means. So why is physician-specific planning so important? Why do we have a physician-specific planning group? That's because we know your pain points. We work with physicians pretty much exclusively. So we know planning opportunities that can get you to financial independence faster. That's probably, when I sit down with someone and I ask a physician, like, what is your goal? What are your top goals? It's always some version of financial independence. We want to get you there as fast as we can. A lot of physicians are targeted expensive insurance policies that you don't need. There's a lot of scare tactics out there. So having someone who's objective, right, and is a fiduciary who's putting your needs above their own, looking at these policies, talking through that with you, that can save you some money. We will think through AGI lowering strategies, which can help you, especially if you're a student loan borrower and you're going maybe for some kind of forgiveness in the long run. And
majority of who we work with are physicians. Like looking at who we've consulted with for student loan plans, it's number one, the like most common profession is physicians. So we are very, very familiar
about it, right?
Yeah.
Medical school is just so stinking expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And then the main reason I think that physician-specific planning is so important and why we have this webinar today is burnout. Burnout is so high. So I think it's worth it to talk to somebody who understands that and maybe some ways that we can reduce that, right? So who is, or who are, what is, right, however you want to word that, the SLP Wealth Physician Planning Group. So yours truly, as well as some of the other fine folks that you see on our call today. We want to make sure that you're not making big mistakes. We have alphabet soup, right? So we're CSLPs, that's a student loan designation. We're CFPs, we have CFAs, all the designations, right? We integrate student loan planning with your financial plan. So I like to use the phrase, we're student loan informed. So we're not telling everybody, right, eat rice and beans and pay off your loans. Some people are going for a loan payoff strategy, but that's not the default mode, right? We're taking a very, case by case approach, looking at your income projections. What did you borrow? What are your job prospects? Do you think you'll be with a government or nonprofit employer? So we're kind of looking at all the pieces before we make a recommendation. And we'll talk about your tax filing status too.
Mm-hmm.
We really want to bring peace of mind to you guys and fiduciary planning. So, Angie and Jared and Travis, they're all married to medicine. So we have people on the team firsthand who know your pain points, right? Not just because we work with you professionally, but some people on the team actually like know personally, right? The ins and outs, what it's like, the daily grind. So that is who we are.
Yeah. And Jared is out. He just had his baby boy. So we've got yet another baby boy on the SLP team.
We've had a lot of children born this year into the
Yeah.
SLP Wealth team, and I'm only responsible for like half of the boys because I had twins. Everyone who's been born so far has been a boy, so we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. We got to find out who's going to break it with the girl.
We'll see. So if you guys would like an objective set of eyes, someone to talk to do your financial plan, right? To see how it integrates with your student loans, check out slpwealth.com/book.